journeyed over mountains and fought my way through war zones. I struggled through deserts and prayed in sacred places.
Okay, so in summary, I think what we've had so far is Dawn looking at things from her perspective of being in the House of Commons, and, you know, to some extent talking about the way in which Black MPs work together and what the issues are and making sure that people are engaged. Deboroh then had a very different take on it and was talking very much from a community basis and saying that everybody can and should get involved where they feel able to. And George has looked almost on a global level in terms of saying, yes, politics is important, and has taken us on a quick trot around the globe, in effect, but has given some very concrete examples of how politics influences everything in our lives. Okay, so with all of this information, over to the audience. What would you like to ask? And I know that there are already some questions in the chat stream that I'm sure colleagues will be picking up.
There's a question of whether one can be active in politics and still hang on to their faith.
Can we put that as a specific question to Deboroh and George, just to seek your views, please?
Chair, if I might come in. The argument, as I see it, is this: for decades we have been struggling in our community, in the voluntary sector and elsewhere, to make things happen for our community. But no matter how hard we work in our community, we still have to look upwards for the assistance that we need to make things happen in our community, whether that's financial assistance, expertise, etc. And my point is, politics is a very powerful tool when you use mainstream politics to address the issues within your community. No ifs, no buts in my mind. And I say to you this: when the Stephen Lawrence family were looking for solution for the murderers of their son, they engaged the community at a level that was designed to put pressure on the police and pressure on the government. But nothing in real terms happened. Nothing in real terms happened until a politician decided, after pressure was put on the government by Nelson Mandela, that an inquiry would take place that would look deeper into the problem. And out of that came the report, which identified the source of the problem in the police force. And it is that which has then caused the changes in society, some of which we are benefiting from, and other communities benefit from. And my point is, we can work very hard at a local level. And I've seen this because I've been there. I was working very hard at the African Caribbean Center, trying to do stuff there, trying to get the African Caribbean to transfer to our community as an asset. And in the flick of a switch, all that work was thrown away because a politician decided we weren't going to do this. And the point is, that's where the power lies to bring about changes in our community. That's where the power lies for us to change our lives ourselves if we can get our hands on the levers of politics and the power that brings about changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, George. Deboroh, would you like to make any comments about what George has said, and also any comments about this whole issue of politics and faith?
First of all, I think it's really important that we recognize who is. So what I'm saying is that you can't have politics, party politics, at a distance from the actions of the community. So it might start with football, for example, and your child has nowhere to play. You engage in that activism, and that puts pressure on the politicians for change. It was my amazement and sadness to discover that so I went into Labour Party politics thinking, aha, this is how we make a difference, this is how we make changes, this is what we need to do. And actually what I've discovered is that there are different hurdles. But what all of our politicians listen to is what the community is asking for. So how can we disassociate ourselves or see it as secondary when people are bringing their concerns to us, whether that is about football, for example? Because once people are bothered about football, then that brings them on to being bothered about actions in sport in schools, which brings them on to not only sports in schools but the education that their children are receiving in school. So one kind of builds on the other. I don't think it's a kind of either or. I think because we are so high up in everybody's political agenda, I think that we need to harness that position by working with the communities who are impacted. I mean, it's interesting being a councillor is interesting, and you do find allies across within the party and across the party. But those allies are not moved by me, Deborah Sangester, but they're moved rather by the needs of the community that I'm trying to articulate. But if people are not engaging with the voluntary sector, if people are not engaging with community with community politics, then anyway, so I'm going over the same thing. I don't think it's an either or. I think that we need to hear from and listen to what is impacting people, and I'm not sure we have the mechanisms to do that. It's naive, for me at least, it's naive to think that I'm there and therefore it's all going to be better because I'm there. Without allies, without a groundswell from the community, I could be there little more.
I think, Chair, I think the point Deborah's making is absolutely the point. That is to say, you can't have a politician up there somewhere and no platform to stand down. That politician needs the platform of his community or her community to stand down, and that's where the voluntary sector and politics within the community comes in, because that politician then becomes the voice for that community, and he then or she then becomes the instrument for changes at the upper level and bring those and ensuring that those changes filter down to the grassroots. And if people say that the changes needs to start at the grassroots, I'm going to agree with them, but I'm going to also say that you still need the politicians in the Houses of Parliament, in the chambers in Leicester, to bring about the changes that we want in our community. And without having the politicians there, we've struggled for over 50 years in our community to bring about changes because we had no local politicians who would stand up for the causes that we have. And so we didn't have the link from the community to the chambers. Now we have some links to the chambers. It's still hard work bringing about those changes. And we do need the community to understand that we need them supporting us, because only with their support can we do the things that they say that we need to do. Another important thing that we mustn't lose sight of is that we mustn't just rely on Black politicians to bring about the changes. The changes can be brought about by other politicians of different races.
And just on that note, talking about allies, we do have 3 other councillors in the audience. So I'd like to invite them to make a contribution, because I'm sure that you will all have views. And they are Vi Dempster, Kirk Masters and Sue Waddington.
There's a question actually on the chat from Kirk Masters. Maybe he would like to put it to the group, to the panel.
Happy to do that, Chair. And it was a bit of a a question to my to my colleagues. Really, I wasn't expecting to be brought in, but I think George's point, Deborah's points, and Dawn's points are absolutely right for the conversation and crucial in terms of how we need to bring community more into politics and represent their views and opinions. And George's point and Deborah's point about communities getting behind their politicians to show that they're supporting them and pushing them along is absolutely crucial to that. And I think it's the only way forward. You know, Leicester is a very diverse place. It has different communities, and it's really important that the community feels part of the decision-making process. And I think if we was all honest on here, the politicians and those that aren't would say that most communities don't feel part of the process. And we have to take some responsibility for that, because we are badge holders, for want of a better phrase, at this point. And I think we need to learn more. I think we need to offer more to our communities as well. It is difficult. George's synopsis about where power lies and etc. are very true and very poignant. But that doesn't mean that we can't make change. You know, that's why we've all come into this, to represent our communities. And I think we need to continue to do that. But we have to bring, especially the youngsters, with us, because they are the future. And if we don't bring them on board and more people disengage, then we'll be left with the same power struggles that we've had for centuries and generations, unfortunately.
Thank you very much indeed, Kirk, for that contribution. Would either Deborah or George like to say anything in response to what Kirk has said?
Sue Waddington here. Shall I say a few words,
Thank
Chair?
you. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I've been extremely interested in what Dawn and Deborah and George have said. And I think I have a question. I think it's vitally important that we do hear voices that perhaps are currently silent, or maybe not silent, but that we don't have roots through to. And I'd like to ask Dawn and Deborah how we can hear those voices, how we can encourage those voices to be part of the system, so that the council, for example, is far clearer about what people actually want, rather than the council assuming that they know best.
I would say, but I think that we need to listen to and hear from impacted communities. I think that as elected councillors, we have to understand who our communities are. And so the time that we spend listening to people talk about the need to play football in a safe space is also the time when we can support them to be more active in demanding that safe space, because all we can do is respond to what people are bringing to us. I think that we need to remember, as Black people, we need to remember our history, not simply, you know, the one that says divide and conquer and do the same thing time over again and again and still do it again and still get it, you know, still be dividing and conquering, but also that we are born out of struggle. We're here because of struggle. So I'm not saying, you know, go and have some long conversation about how colonialism was bad and terrible, but I think rather to talk about how we are working through what that colonial yoke has meant. I think it's unreasonable to only go and talk to people about what's bothering them when we're intending to have a by-election or something. You know, I think we need to, you know, look at how do we engage with communities, and particularly the African heritage community who are in pockets of community across the city, rather than in, you know, one continent. It used to be Highfields, it's not anymore. So how do we engage? And I think that we have to engage where people's interests are, and from those interests broaden.
In answering Sue's question directly, I think, especially in the African heritage community, I'd say, but I wouldn't single it out as the only community, because in the world that I'm in, it's very clear to me that the vast majority of the residents in that world have absolutely no faith in politicians, and certainly not in the political system, because they see it as not being for them, but against them. And what we have to do is to try and persuade our communities, be whatever that community is. And if I speak specifically about the African heritage community, we've got to persuade them that the political system as it exists, whilst it's been the one that has put its knee on our necks for centuries, it can also be the system that removes that knee of our necks if we get into the heart of it and get to the point where the power and the real power lies. And so in answer to Sue's question, I would say, Sue, there's a job to be done where we have got to persuade our community of the importance and the benefits of politics. And that isn't easy, because there's been many centuries of doubt in the political system within the country and the world that we live in. And trying to persuade people to say, you know, those people that have done all these things to you for centuries, you've actually got to go and say to them, I want to be a part of what it is that you are, and then make them believe that they can turn that into a benefit to themselves. And when I speak to many people from my community, they think I'm in cloud cuckoo land. But the truth is, power isn't going to be handed to us like that. It isn't. As I see it, there are two ways of getting power to bring about the changes that we're so desperately fighting for. One way is to create a revolution where we go out there and physically fight for it. And I can't see that happening. And I can't see us winning that battle for all the obvious reasons. So the other way is to go at it through politics, and by using allies in politics and in other sources and in other streams that bring about changes in our world. One is definitely politics. The finance arena is also another area where we can operate, but only by persuading our community that that is the path. If we're not going to make the mistakes that the Black Panthers made in America and elsewhere up and down, across the globe, where we think that taking up arms is the way to do it. We've succeeded in parts of Africa because that was different. But when you're here in the belly of the beast, and the beast is the one that's dictating the terms, violence isn't going to do it. You have to use your head and other strategies to do that. And there's a job for us as politicians to say to the community, this is the path of travel if you want to get the knee off your neck. And I'm saying to people in Leicester, there's an election coming up in 18 months' time, a local election. We need to be out there getting signed up in parties to become party members so that we can influence who become our councillor if we can't become that councillor. And therefore, telling that councillor when he become elected, this is why you've got my vote, and this is what I expect from you. And it has to be as blatant as that when we sit and talk to these people. Thank you, Chair.
I'm just going to warn Vi and Jeff that it would be really nice to hear from both of you at some point this evening, but I've noticed that Nicholas has his hand up. So would you like to put your question, Nicholas?
As elected representatives, do you feel that you are getting the right forum to ask the constituents what they want? Because it becomes I use this word a bit conservative, but it's become a cliche to say, ask people what they want. And people talk about ask people what they want. Do you actually find the right forum to ask people what they want? So that's one question. The other one was to do with how do you go ahead and engage people in terms of getting involved in politics? It's great we are talking about it here virtually, but how do we go ahead and engage an awful lot of people and make sure that they get engaged in politics? Because I think that's the disconnect, isn't it? We can talk about it here, but how do we do it in the background so that people get it?
I think I've alluded to the idea in terms of how you would engage the community, because you've got to show them the benefits. And that benefit isn't something that is over there that can't be reached. It is a very real benefit. Look, I've lived in the city for the better part of 50 years, and I've seen other communities come to this city, not just one community, but other communities. They've come in after the African heritage community and get engaged in the heart of the political system and make it work for them, because they understand that if they want improvements in their community, if they want improvements in their life, if they want things to happen for their children, only through politics, mainstream politics, will that happen. And not only have they got themselves engaged in the heart of mainstream politics, as Councillor Sangester said, they've also created a base within their community upon which those politicians stand. And if those politicians become lazy, they remove them come the next election. And we need to have a similar, vigorous and effective system within our community. Now, Councillor Sangster made the point, our community is spread across the city. And so it's very difficult to get the community in a localized way to participate in the way in which I'm suggesting it. But what I will say, there are people who are elected within the city who looks and the vote right across the city, as opposed to different wards, as opposed to different constituency. And in that sense, our vote can be made to count, and made to count in a real sense. There's over 30 plus thousands of us African heritage people here, and that represents a real number when it comes to voting. And if we were to use that, we could bring about changes in our community and effective changes in our community. It is very difficult, the challenge that we're facing, but it can be done because other communities have come and done it. In terms of the right forum, churches is a good forum. We got a lot of African heritage people in church, so we can do it there. In the sports field, we get a lot of African people going out in playing football. Wherever they are, engage with them and talk to them and share with them the benefits of being in mainstream politics.
Deboroh, is there anything that you'd like to add to the responses to either of those two questions?
But I think that we need to be able to demonstrate the material benefits of engaging in football. We need people to take part in understanding the education of their children, and it's not like a pie in the sky thing, So one of the things I'm doing somewhere else is that people are recognizing that they need to complain, but that their complaints are being heard and responded to. And this is I'm doing some stuff around Stop Search, and that seems to be having broader dividends. Yeah. So there's some my conclusion to the conversation is that we need to be able to, people need to be able to see that engaging in the political sphere, whatever that looks like, has material benefits. So whether that's, it has material benefits. I know Kirk had said, not sound bites, but if people are engaged in football, if people are engaged in childcare, if people are then we need to be where the people are engaged and help them to see the difference that their engagement does make.
Absolutely. And I mean, if I was to give an example, Chair, of what I'm talking about, so as a local politician, myself and Councillor Sangster, we fought very hard to have the African Caribbean Centre be transferred to the community as an asset, because people in the community say this is what they want to happen. We've now managed to persuade the powers that be at the council to consider this in a real serious sense. And so there is a consultation out there that people can now influence the process. And there are three questions on the ballot paper. One of the questions is, do you want this centre to be transferred to the community as an asset?
Okay.
That's one question. The other question is, do you want the centre to be run by the council, continue to be run by the council, or do you want joint running of the centre by the council and the community? Those are three real questions. Now, if the community understands the implication of that consultation and wants the community centre to be run by the community, we know which question they've got to respond to. And that is, if they then respond to that question in sufficient numbers, the council has to respond to their desire. And then we can start the process of asset transfer to our community. And the point I'm making there is the councillors such as myself and Councillor Sangester, we've done our bit, have to be instructed by the community that this is what we want to happen to the African Caribbean Centre. Now we're coming back to the community to say, now make your mark on that consultation that confirms what we've been saying to the power that be at the council. And if they make their mark in sufficient number, then the process of asset transfer can start. And there's real benefit. We've been fighting for this to happen since the 90s.
Claudia Webbe has very kindly joined us. And so I'd like to ask Claudia if she would like to say something.
Firstly, I want to thank you all just for inviting me. As usual, you know, I really do enjoy these Friday night sessions, and I want to thank George and everyone that puts these sessions on, because it's so vital that we have a place to chat and a place to engage and a place to exchange some wonderful ideas. And many have said already that politics affects all parts of our lives and every aspect of our life, and there is nothing that we do in life that doesn't in one way or the other involve politics at all. So I think that it's really important that this discussion is happening. I had a discussion earlier with George, and I thought I wouldn't really be able to make this session simply because that, you know, I have faced an enormous amount of pressure in recent times, and that pressure isn't just the circumstances that I'm going through in terms of the court ordeals, but also in terms of the enormous amount of abuse, online abuse, racism and racial abuse, threats to my safety that I am receiving. The extent of it is absolutely appalling, actually. And so I am, you know, having to deal with all of that and what it means to me as a person and how it's affecting me as an individual. And it is traumatic, I have to say. But however, I believe in this cause, and I believe that we have a place in politics. I believe that as Black people, we have a place and we've earned our right to be here. You know, you will know that I am a Leicester girl. I was born and brought up in Leicester to parents who came here from Nevis. So I'm a daughter of the Windrush generation. And, you know, we have come and been part of this society and helped to build what the society is now. And we have every right to have our place in this society and every right to have our views expressed and every right to be heard and to not be silenced. And politics has to allow that to happen. And we have to continue to fight for that, because that's what our generations before us fought for. We can't wait continuously for movements like the Black Lives Matter movement that actually was quite defining in waking up the whole world to the systemic and structural racism that we continuously face day in, day out. You will have heard that politics matters, not just in the places of power, not just in our town halls and not just in Parliament, but politics matters on our streets and in our movements and in our communities. And that's where politics also matters in terms of how we affect change in all walks of life. And that is why we have to fight to make sure that we have the representations in the right places at the right times. Ours is not one of just having black faces in high places. There's no point in having black faces in high places if the material change is zero. So it is not having black faces in high places, but it's having a conscious and articulate faces that want to see the end of racism and discrimination. And anybody that represents us in power must seek to strive every single day to end racism, inequality, and discrimination. That has to be the goal because it's so rife in our society. I'm going to end it on this. We can't allow our communities to go backwards. We've come out of great struggle, and we've come out of great movements. Politics matters. Don't ever let anybody tell you that it doesn't matter. Politics is relevant to our lives, whether in power or whether on our streets and in our communities. It matters, everything we do. And I'm sure you would have heard it from colleagues already. But everything you do, everything we do has been made possible because of decisions that have been made by decision makers based on politics.
Thanks for sharing your passion with us. If you're able to stay around, I'm sure that colleagues on this call will have questions for you. So, does anybody want to ask a question?
The question was, has the Black Lives Matter effect worn off? And I really do need to say, if people believe that the Black Lives Matter started yesterday or the day before, then they really do not understand what the Black Lives Matter struggle is about. And I've said this many times before. The Black Lives Matter struggle started the very first day Europeans stepped on the shores of Africa. And ever since then, the Black Lives Matter struggle has been going on. So what we see happen recently has amplified the situation as it impacts on the Black community. And people across the globe see it for themselves happening in real life, how white folks have put their necks on the Black community because they think themselves to be superior. But that struggle is nowhere near over, and its effect will be ongoing from generation to generation until we are able to change the power structure, where we get into the position where we are dictating the way in which society operates, and that operation is for the benefit of the Black community and other communities, unlike the way it is at the moment, where only the privileged whites benefit from society.
Thank you, George. I'd just like to remind colleagues that you're here so that you can put questions to our local and national representatives. So please make the most of the opportunity, because we only have 20 minutes left of the call, and part of that will have to be devoted to telling you what's coming up.
The title of the meeting is Politics a Solution to Black Lives Matter. And part of this was generated because of the elections coming up in about 18 months' time. And what I'd want to say, Chair, if there's anyone on the call who is interested in getting involved in local politics, mainstream politics, becoming councillors, becoming chair for wards, etc., if they can put their details in the call, because we've got mentors who are ready and willing to support anyone who say that they'd like to become a politician.
Right, thank you very much indeed. That's a very timely reminder to everybody, and a great opportunity, a supported opportunity if you want to get into politics. So please, and if for some reason you don't put your details in the chat, then you can always contact us through the website.
Madam Chair, that's a very good offer from you, George is talking about there. But does it mean that it doesn't matter what party or whatever? Is that true, George?
As far as the African Heritage Alliance is concerned, we are about getting people into politics. And what we we do know is that whichever party is in power, they're the one that bring about the changes. And therefore, we are not party specific. All we're interested in, are you wanting to get into politics mainstream? Of course, we'd like them all to be Labour.
You don't just want people to enter politics for the sake of entering politics. You want to enter politics to make a difference, to make change. Yeah, and there's no point entering politics or being really actually encouraging people to enter in politics if the plan is to maintain the status quo, because that does great harm to our communities, and we know that. So if we are serious about engaging in political discourse, individuals also need to find their soul. What are they about? And what do they stand for? And what do they want to achieve? Because otherwise it becomes a career move that doesn't really affect the transformation that is needed for our communities. And we do need that transformational change. But
you see,
I think that's important. And I think also there are many people here who's told me that because of what has happened to people like me, it's a very frightening experience. What happens to people like Diane Abbott, it's a very frightening experience, and it puts people off. So also we also need to know how we support people to overcome those fears as well.
In the comments that I made, I did make it quite clear that there are mentors that will be available to support these would-be councillors. And that is because we understand the difficulty and the problem. And we also understand what politicians in our community should be doing for the benefit of our community. We do understand that. And that's why I say there are mentors who are available to support you. So if you are interested in getting into local mainstream politics, then please let us hear from you.
There is actually a comment on the chat whereby one person has said, I am a novice in local mainstream politics, but with the support from mentors, as you suggested, I wish to be considered.
Politics is a very serious issue, and there's no good saying I'm putting hands up and I'm going to be a politician.
Well, and do people go through the process?
Yeah, they go through a process, but if you identify the process that's taking place from way back and now, the process, I'm not too sure about the process to go through, because it's always a stumbling block. Claudia is right. We need to address these things in a more serious manner, because it's like putting you on a board of executive or committee where you have no idea, or you're just there to keep a seat warm. I'm not interested in that. You need politics. Leadership means what it says. And if you're not going to take that role seriously, it's a pointless exercise.
I think that George made it very clear that the scheme that he's referring to is supported. So if somebody puts themselves forward, they will be assigned a mentor who will help them to understand the processes and to get the most out of the scheme, so that they get to a point of feeling sufficiently confident whereby they can put themselves forward to become presumably a councillor.
Yeah, I just say, before becoming a councillor, I had mentors who coached me, mentors who gave me insight into the difficulties. I had mentors who told me of the problems that Claudia is identifying. I had mentors that did all of that. I had local mentors and I had national mentors that took me through the process. And what we're offering is a similar support for someone who's serious about getting into politics to do good for our community. We haven't got enough politicians in the process. There are communities here who make up more than 50% of the councils in the city, and they are reaping the benefits of it. We've been here long enough to be reaping benefits from what politics can bring to our community.
So now I would just like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. In particular, I would like to thank our participants, Dawn Butler, Claudia Webbe, Deboroh Sangester, George Cole, also councillors who've joined us and were members of the audience, and some of you made contributions: Vi Dempster, Kurt Masters, Sue Waddington and Jeff Whittle. And I would also like to thank people behind the scenes, members of AHA who've been doing the slides, trawling through the chat stream, etc., and just being here to support. But most importantly, thank you to members of the community for giving up your time this evening, being with us and hearing what our politicians have had to say, whether they're local or national, and encouraging you to get involved in whatever way you feel you can. And it is about representation so that we can make sustainable changes. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy your weekend.